along, if you've been in the Diamond membership or the first Cash Flow Engineering, it is an iterative process. So I would tune into Cash Flow Engineering Q&A and office hours and any of the presentations. Even if you think, oh, I've seen this before, again, it's an iterative process. And so there's nuances that Dan is always finding and articulating. So I just keep tuning in, and I'll hand it off to Dan and Randy.
Randy, you're muted, but there we go.
They say I do some of my best work on mute.
Okay, well, let me introduce you. Some folks probably have seen your name or your face, or maybe heard you on my podcast before. But let me see if I can adequately introduce you. Which is challenging. It's challenging. When I first came to know you through some mutual contacts, I reached out and I said, "Hey, I think I need a coach," and they said, "Well, you should talk to Randy, but I really can't describe him. He's non-conventional. You'll just have to meet him." And of course, that piqued my ears because I fancy myself to be non-conventional. And so it's like, ooh, okay, this is interesting. Let me see what this guy is all about. Now, you grew up in South Central LA. And there's a book about your family called The Six Lessons for Six Sons.
Absolutely, written by my dad, who was a fairly successful entrepreneur in Los Angeles. He was started in the landscaping business and went on to own racehorses and other things. And he was an eclectic person, although he didn't have a university education. He probably was the smartest person that I've known, and I knew and I've known since then.
Now that says a lot because you played college basketball, and then you worked at Intel for a while.
Intel, yes, and then go ahead.
And then Microsoft, right. And you had a fair amount of encounters with Bill Gates. So when you're talking about your dad was the smartest person that you knew, assuming that factors in the fact that you worked with Bill Gates in the early days of Microsoft.
It's interesting because when we were at Microsoft back in the 90s, there was always a need to characterize who was smart and what smart actually meant. And so smart isn't necessarily IQ points in the traditional sense, but smart is being able to take disparate pieces of information from just about anywhere, amalgamate it, consolidate it, and then direct it for some useful purpose. And my dad was an expert at that, having come out of segregated Texas, East Texas, and moving to Los Angeles. He had a lot of experiences. So even though I have immense amount of respect for Bill Gates and I know his background, and I'm actually writing a chapter on him now in my book about extraordinary leaders, he did have the benefit of the parents that were very prominent and had the resources and had the direction, and definitely did optimize what he was capable of doing. But in terms of, you take him and put him in the middle of South Central LA, he'll admit that he doesn't really fit in.
That'd be a fun reality show, though.
Yeah, it would. But he and Paul Allen used to go down to Portland in the Albina district, which was mainly all Black, and that's where he kind of started the company. And he was always talking about his experience watching movies like Superfly and all this other stuff. So yeah, it'd be different. It's a clash in cultures, but I'm sure he'll figure it out. But my dad used to have to figure out things on the fly, and he taught us how to do that.
Yeah, 6 Lessons for Six Sons. I've read the book. I highly recommend it. There are more than 6 lessons in that book, but it's a worthwhile read. Now, then you went on, you worked with another billionaire in InfoSpace, and then you started your own business, technology company, and then you've been a faculty member at my alma mater in the MBA program at Seattle U for 15 years, 20 years?
Yeah, about 20 years, but I actually have worked my way down the food chain. Some people may know my story. I started out on the board of Regents, And you get there, and these are the people that are supposed to guide and direct what happens at the university. I got in some of those meetings, and I thought that they were fairly boring, and everybody was kind of it was kind of a mutual admiration society for me, and I wanted to be more hands-on. So I started a course called Extraordinary Leaders, and I got the idea from watching C-SPAN. And they used to have a program called Book Notes. And one of the things that when you study leaders of all types, leaders are readers. And so this Book Notes program had books about extraordinary leaders. And I thought you could actually teach these principles to people. And that's when I piloted the course. And it's been oversubscribed ever since, fortunately. C-SPAN actually did a profile on the course and myself, because they were looking at people that had done something significant as a result of watching C-SPAN. And so they brought the whole bus out, and everything was at Seattle U. It was pretty interesting.
You've been, other fun facts, you've been, what is it, alumni of the year, or I don't know the exact.
Yeah, you looked that up. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to go to undergraduate school at Lewis and Clark College in Portland. And I said, I beat out Monica Lewinsky for that award.
But you were alumni of the year, both from your undergraduate and your graduate school.
Yeah, and hopefully that will translate into something good for us today.
Now, the thing that is probably the main reason why I started working with you was not just because of all your accomplishments career-wise, but you have an extraordinary relationship with your 3 kids, who I think they're well-adjusted folks. And it's sort of like, well, who do you want to, you could work with a lot of coaches out there, work with a lot of advisors, but the thing I'm always about is, how do I get closer to the things that I want? Kind of want to work with someone who actually accomplished the things that I want, which is, you have had a storied, both professional and academic careers, and you have great relationships with your kids. It seems like you're talking to them every day. They're reaching out for you for advice, for better and for worse. They don't follow it.
When they don't have me on block. that reminds me of something. I have 2 daughters, okay, and they're both at Stanford for different reasons. One's an administrator there, went to undergraduate school at USC. And the other one actually went to undergraduate school at Stanford, and now she's back for a PhD in education. But the one that went to undergrad, we call her Coco. Her real name is Nicole, but we call her Coco. She would say, if she had to be alone with me at home, she'd, "Don't leave me here with Dad. He's just going to talk about achievement." Yeah. So that's kind of how he feels about it. But yeah, I've been fairly fortunate to kind of take different pieces from different families. That when I grew up, my parents divorced when I was about 10, and so I was fortunate enough to have coaches and other people that invested in my life. I had a 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Elmore. I still talk about her because she was the lab assistant when she was at Tuskegee Institute. It was called then as Tuskegee University. She was a lab assistant for George Washington Carver, the inventor and the person who did all the things with the peanuts. Yeah. And it was just inculcated in us very early on that you could do anything, irrespective of whether you were from South Central LA or from Beverly Hills. You still had the capability of doing whatever it is you wanted to do. And so that instilled a set of principles, as well as a lot of confidence in my brothers and me. I'm 4th out of the 6th, and it just made us as comfortable anywhere. And so when my parents split up, I was with my mom we stayed with my mom until we got to driving age, and we needed more resources, and we went with my dad, who had the resources and also had the ethics around working and around comportment in public and things like that. That was really important. So a lot of that translated to my kids, but I was asked just the day before yesterday if someone had 3 kids and they were wondering, how do your kids turn out? How did they turn out? And I said there were 2 things that we always had. Okay, one is the cant jar. Okay, so since they could talk, we had the cant jar, and if you said can't, you had to put money in the jar. Okay, and of course Coco asked me, well, who gets the money? And I said, well, the one who can. Okay. And so that's one thing that we always did. And the other thing was I never let them say it's not fair, whatever the problem was, it's not fair. Because I wanted them to understand that life wasn't going to be fair. And that if it had to be fair for you to go out and achieve, then you're going to have some problems. So those 2 things outside of just being supportive, I can talk about things like, there's always a bunch of books around. We had page goals during the summer for summer reading. And you had to see who all did all read what pages and what books and things like that. So that was always interesting.
And you've read personally over 2,000 books.
Yeah. And
oh, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned Bill Gates earlier. When I got to Microsoft in 1992, he was renowned for reading a book a week. And I was lucky to do a book a month. And I recognized that all the leaders that I knew and that I read about were voracious readers. And so I started to pick up the pace, and that's led me to about 2,000 books. And although I haven't done as much fiction as I would have liked, we continue as a family to read books and pass them around. And we also take master classes. And so if there's a master class, I know you've mentioned Chris Voss and his book, Never Split the Difference. That's one of the ones that we read, take master classes. And then I've started some mastermind groups for younger people that just haven't had the guidance. One thing about my dad, we called him Boss. Everybody called him Boss, even his younger siblings called him Boss. But Boss would always, he'd invest in the lives of young people, especially those that didn't have a father. And he would treat them as if they were one of his kids. And if they got in trouble, either school or the law or something like that, he would go, handle it. And that was my role model. So I continue to develop, invest in the lives of young people. I've worked with a lot of athletes and that kind of thing. And it's just important. It's just part of our family. Going.
Yeah, I love that. And I've heard some of the stories over the years of the kids that you've pulled under your wing, and it's pretty cool. Now, a couple things I wanted to talk with you about while we've got you. First off, when we started the certainty certification process, it was important to make sure that you were part of the advisory board, and in particular, you're really helping us shape the content because you know how to work with extraordinary leaders. That's what the course you've taught, and you came up with a theme that we've adopted around transformation. But I want to talk to you about just who you typically work with is sort of the top percent of the top percent, top half a percent, or top half a percent of half a percent, and there's specific criteria, ways that you know that someone is part of the top half a percent.
Well, it's interesting how this came about. There's always going to be a story with me, usually around the kids or something like that. But when Coco, my second daughter, was like 8 months old, she was 8 months old. It was New Year's Eve. We were all home. I was with a guy by the name of Todd Holmdahl, who was a Microsoft VP now, executive VP. but he is like the father of the Xbox.
Hmm.
At the time, we were working together at another company and spent a lot of time together. He was athletic, we work out together and stuff. So New Year's Eve came and Coco just stood up and started walking. Okay, like 8 months, just started walking around. And I looked at Todd and I said, and Todd had gotten a master's degree from Stanford, an undergrad and a master's degree from Stanford. And he was part of the Terman Award winners, where they take the 3 top people in the engineering group and have them recognized. And so Todd was there, and I looked at him and I said, Todd, she's gonna go to Stanford. She's just like you. And of course, that's what she ended up doing. But when she was like 2 years old, okay, about 2.5, I was sitting in church with her, and she was acting out all the time, being hyperactive and all that kind of thing, and asking me questions. And someone came up to me afterwards and said, she's gifted, isn't she? I said, yeah, she's pretty advanced. She said, are you going to teach her how to read? And I said, no, I can't take the questions now. She'll learn it when she can. And then she got B3, okay, and she said, I want a dog. And I said, well, when you can read the can to feed it and stuff, then you can have a dog. And probably about 2 weeks later, she could read. It was just, oh man. Her older sister, who was about 16 months older, she had just eclipsed that and kept going. But what this led to was, I'm going to have to up my game, okay, in order just to be relevant in this house. Right?
Yeah.
And so I started working on myself a lot more and started to try to stay ahead of them. And then my son, who's like 5 years younger, he would hang out with Coco the entire time. And through osmosis, he developed these reasoning skills that were off the chart. And he ended up attending Carnegie Mellon University, but now he's a rapper, becoming more and more famous all the time.
Yeah. So I guess the through line in terms of the extraordinary leaders, and or I'm sorry, the top 0.5%.
Yeah.
What are those tendencies or?
Well, the first thing, if you want to say, how do you quantify who's in there? Just think of a room of 200 people. They're that one person that has the insight and expertise to be able to do what they do. Okay.
Yep.
And so every time that I see someone, I see, are they acting as if they're in the upper 1/2, 1 percentile? Or if there are 200 people in the room, are they the one that you want to go to? Are they the one that you want to listen to? Or do they have the background and capability? It doesn't mean that other people that aren't there, okay, are not worth working with. But there's a certain level of confidence in their ability to perform. There's a certain level of intellectual curiosity. Even if you're doing something physical, something, if it's kinetic or it's still an intellectual curiosity even around the physical elements of it. And so you see that. Then there's also a willingness to pay the price that you don't see in other people. These people like crave a scorecard. They crave challenges. And I see the difference between very smart people and the extraordinary ones is that the very smart people will do their job to the letter and do it very well, but they very, very rarely reflect on whether this job could be done differently and how. And so the people at the upper 1/2 of 1 percentile can take the things that they're working on and say, this could be done better. This can be done differently. And that's when you know you have them. Now you can get people tested. When I was at Microsoft, everybody, I hope nobody did this in the audience, but even if they did, so what? People would have these kids and they wanted them to be special, so special and stuff. And so they take them over to UW and have them tested. And they were smart kids. They were probably in the upper 5 percentile, but they weren't that 1/2 of 1 percentile that that you can see. And it was unfortunate. And when I, once I got it confirmed that like Coco was in there, my daughter was tested, and she was in the upper 1/2 of 1 percentile. Then I started looking, what characteristics does she have that the other kids who were tested that she was with? So she was with a cohort from 2nd grade, to high school. Okay. And in fact, probably 4 to 5 of those kids from 2nd grade are still her best friends. And you have to look at, there aren't very many peers you get when you're up at the upper 1/2 of 1 percentile. And so you have to study history, you have to study other subjects, and that's a way of being able to socialize yourself, really. And so I can see that. I can see it in you, okay? I can see it in some of the other people that I've worked with. And it is something that, so can you teach people to do it? It is something that you have to have some innate capability, but then if you really want to get there, I believe you can get there in some domain if you put in the kind of work that is necessary. Some people can do it without the work. Like if I were doing these spelling words that Coco would have, if she missed one or slightly transposed a letter or something, I would try to give her the whole list again, and she'd say, no, just give me the one I missed. Okay, and so yeah, it's a constant negotiation when you have people like that.
Now, typically when I talk to you, there's a theme. There's a theme for the year. There's an emphasis for the next 30 days or 90 days. Maybe share the thought process, and then what are the themes, what are the things you're focused on for this year, and what are you telling folks they should be focused on?
Well, it's interesting because I've probably interviewed, probably 9,000 people by now, and you see things happen in patterns. And I just came back from a trip being with the company and working with the CEO for the last 3 days. And I'm seeing that the big emphasis is, what does it take to make a true transformation? What does it take to go from where you're thinking about being and where you are to where you're thinking about being or you want to be? And it's amazing, even smart people don't understand this process. One of the things that prominent business leaders and other people get hung up on is having some major vision that they come up with, and then they just start charging toward the vision and see it, and then they find out that the organization can't do it, okay? Or they find out that they're getting tired. The thing that I'm seeing in transformation, it's tantamount to the diffusion of an innovation, okay? You're trying to innovate yourself, or you're trying to innovate, and a lot of times people will think that people just wake up, grab a vision, and start to run with it. If you look at everybody from Gandhi to Martin Luther King to anyone that had a vision that had a lot of people follow it, you find out that there's like 3 things that they had to do before. And that, I say, it's frequency, intensity, and then the purpose, okay? And most people don't understand that incubation period that leaders go through. Everybody talks about the 10,000 hours. They talk about having all the other support systems and things like that. But the bottom line is, most people are not in condition to make the transformation that they want to make. They have not done the either work or the repetitions, which really, I mean, if we want to get, I don't know if you have the good doctor on today, but we want to talk about what happens to you physiologically when you start doing repetitions, and they start, you get the muscle memory from the myelin sheath that wraps around all the nerve endings. Okay? But that sets the foundation for how you're going to do things, whether you're do things, whether you're learning an instrument, a language, or you want to physically transform. It's about frequency first. And then the next thing that and people don't understand it in its full sense is the intensity. Everybody thinks intensity is how hard you're going to do it. Okay, is the force you put behind things, and you have to be this intense person that does all this stuff. That's not the case. The intensity piece, as it relates to transformation and adopting this innovation, which is you, actually comes from the aesthetic that you put on your work. The aesthetic means, what stamp do you put on? What do you do personally that is different? And once you've done enough repetitions, you start to see, hey, I've got other possibilities. Okay. And then after that, you do it a while, then a purpose starts to manifest itself. It starts to come out of there. And that's what makes you prepared to go the distance as it relates to transformations. And so I'm working with a lot of people. Maybe it's because New Year's resolutions were just last month, and now they're starting to fade because people didn't get in shape to do that. And it's interesting, how does this relate to financial certainty? When you do profit priorities, that's like doing the repetitions, okay? And then you get to certain levels, maybe it's a certain level of investment that you put in or a certain level of research. And then you start saying, okay, I know what I'm going to do. And then pretty soon, wow, I've got an overarching purpose that I didn't even have when I started it. And a lot of people maybe in the audience that knows, my eldest daughter, who's the administrator of Stanford, she's run, I think, 5 marathons on 5 continents. Okay. Now, she just started out just jogging. Okay. Then she was going to school at USC, and so she did the LA Marathon. And that led her to an actual job that was a fundraiser that the company did physical challenges. And all of a sudden, she ran 2 marathons, one in Athens, Greece, and one in the Great Wall. And then she said, I'm going to run all 6 or 7 continents, including Antarctica. Okay. And she hadn't done that one yet. But that frequency, intensity, then the purpose starts to manifest itself. Now, she had the same experience when she was writing fiction. She writes romantic comedies, and she used to just dabble in writing. Then she joined a writers group. Okay? Then she moved to San Francisco, and she got around writers that make their living doing this. And then she got an agent. Now she's got a 2-book deal with Amazon Publishing and 6 people from Amazon that are on her account, okay? Including, I just heard the audio version, the narrator. It sounds like some sophisticated English person or something. But you see, each time, that's how it manifests itself. And some people will say, well, no, I just got out and did it with more power. I mean, there's always an exception. But if you really want a transformation, you have to do it. So these organizations, I'll yield this floor in a second, but these organizations that I've been talking to, I can't figure out why the new systems or the new programs that they put in place don't last. Okay, they'll be doing something else next week, or next month.
Yeah.
Now, as for the theme, my theme for 2021 is to double down. Double down on all the things that I think are important. And what does that look like? For example, if I was reading books, I had a clip of 3 a month. Okay, double down and see if you can get 5, 6. Okay, how does that actually work? And what it does is it sets my priorities. So I say, if I were really doubling down on reading, would I be watching this TV show that I'm watching right now? And so those are the kinds of things that I want to do in this year of doubling down.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. I want to talk to you about the 2 tyrants of leadership. I don't know if that's your term.
Yeah.
I learned it from you. So what I'm looking at right now is the outline document that you put together for our certainty certification. So,
Mhm.
like I mentioned, you're on the board. I showed you the initial outline of who was going to be teaching, and ultimately said, like, I want to make sure this program is A level, just like I did when I sent you my book, and I said, okay, you've read 2,000 books. Give me a grade, and then tell me what you think I need to do to get it to an A. So same thing with the certification, and in the outline, you've got the two tyrants, or incorporating in the leadership module, the two tyrants of leadership.
Mhm.
What are those? Why does it matter?
There's the two tyrants I call are scrutiny and expectations. And one of the things that is toughest, if you ask leaders, okay, or if you ask people who had permanent potential, they never actually fulfilled their potential. The majority of the time they said, I couldn't take the scrutiny, everybody watching me all the time, looking at my every move and critiquing me all the time. And I could never get away from anybody. And it's interesting because my eldest brother, whose daughter actually went to Stanford and then on the Harvard Law School, and she's somewhere in Amsterdam at Uber or something. But she was part of Hillary Clinton's legal team when she ran for president. She was second in charge there at about 29 years old. So she's pretty far advanced. But when my brother and I talk about how boss, and during the job, we'd be cutting somebody's trees or something, he would just sometimes just walk away, okay, from the job and just go be by himself for a little while. Okay. And then just come back and start working again, start yelling at us for not doing things right or whatever. But this idea of just getting away from everybody who wants a piece of you, okay, it's very exhausting. Okay? And if you don't know how to release yourself from that scrutiny, if you always have to have a bunch of people around you to make you feel good, and yet it starts turning the other way. Okay, it starts to motorize the generator. We talk about you're not generating energy, it's being sucked out of you like a motor. Okay, then you have to somehow recharge. That's scrutiny is just a real tough part, and you have to get used to it. That's the water you swim in. It's like the old joke about the fish in the bowl. We said, "How's the water?" You say, "What water?" Okay. Then the other piece are the expectations that people have of you. How much money you're going to make, how much money you're going to give them, how much attention are you going to give them, how much recognition are you going to give them. People work for recognition, and they expect you every time they do something that is, in their opinion, noteworthy. You have to go, you're expected to go and make a big deal of it, even if you don't feel like it. In terms of performance, no one is in business to go broke. Okay? No one's in business not to optimize their situation. And yet, when you talk to people about, what are the expectations for yourself? And I've been doing this for the last couple of days, so it's really on my mind. I see people that are disconnected, okay, in terms of the expectations for themselves versus the expectations they have for their boss. So if they want their boss out there working overtime for them, they want their boss out to, making sure that they're hitting all the financial goals, and yet they're saying, okay, it's 4:30, 5 o'clock, I got to pack up and go. Okay, but I expect the boss to be here when I leave, and the boss to be here when I return in the morning. And so those are two tyrants, because you just don't escape them, and you just have to deal with them like any tyrant. Sooner or later, you're just going to have to come to grips with them. So that's that piece.
Circling back on, you were talking about expectations and, maybe expectations and scrutiny. So you and I talk a lot about momentum. as a theme, and how we're always biasing momentum. And one of the things that you caution me about is when momentum really starts to pick up, that there's, I'll just say, forces that start to act against it.
Hmm.
And so, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's almost metaphysical what happens, because the law of inertia, body in motion stays in motion, body at rest stays at rest. Then all of a sudden you get into motion and you start to take advantage of that inertia, and people around you see that. Okay, there's a tendency to regulate the speed limit, no matter how close they are. They could be family, they could be some, but they have a tendency either with a comment to try and slow you down, or they go out and do something that you have to divert your attention to them. And my son was a basketball player in high school and college, and a football player. But if we were in the gym, and he was working on his game, dribbling through cones and shooting jumpers and all this kind of stuff, and there could be 5 baskets in the gym, there could be 2 people in it, 2 or 3 people in the gym, invariably somebody is going to come and shoot the ball right in the middle of the time we're dribbling, or drilling. They're just going to stop the momentum. Now they could be at their basket doing the same thing, but they're going to disrupt you. Okay, and you have to deal with the people that see that you may be getting away from them. Okay? So as you're trying to gather momentum, people want you to have that tangency with them. They want to make sure you don't get too far away from them. And you really do have to use some very very keen techniques in order to make sure that you make allowances for that, okay, but that you aren't stopped by it.
Do you want to share a couple of those, or do you mind sharing a couple of those?
One of the things that we do, say we're at the gym and somebody shoots, okay, over there. Say, hey, do you want to join us? You want to go through some of the paces? And you find out, yeah, they would like to join you. So you put them in the drill for a while, and about, maybe 5 minutes, they're back shooting at their basket, because they're not going to be able to keep at your pace. It's the same way at home, the same way at work. Okay, I'm going to bring you into this next initiative since you've had so many things to say, okay, and so many things to do. We're going to give you an assignment. Always give people who are making problems assignments. And once they start to do that, when they're making problems for you, and they feel like they're part of something, either they'll get up and go to work with you, or they'll go shoot at another basket.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of the you're the one who introduced me to the teaching smart people how to learn article, but research, and the article talks about espouse values versus values in action, and the gap between what people say about themselves and how they're actually behaving. And that sort of inviting people in exercise is a good way to stress test or get a sense of how big their gap is, right? Because what they're saying is, I want to be involved and I want to do all these things. You invite them in, and then pretty quickly they're, oh, you know what, I gotta head out. Or you say, hey, if you want to participate in the next meeting, let me know. You never hear anything.
Well, the interesting thing about that article, Teaching Smart People How to Learn, there's a concept in there called double loop learning. But you go out and you do something, then you reflect on what you've done, and then you do it differently, you do it better. And it's interesting how many things you can take from the sports/athletics world, because everybody is, I can say film session, and I can see people just blush because if they've ever had a coach that showed film of their last game or what they're doing and critiqued them, the value of double loop learning. You do it, you go up, you reflect on it, and you do it again. It's amazing that we have to have a coach teach us how to do it properly, because most of the time when you start to reflect, you start placing blame on other people instead of seeing that it's you who handles that. And over time, you start to get a theory of how you operate. You can say that you operate in certain ways. Like I'll say, I don't yell at my kids. Okay. And yet, if you ask them to say, oh, so let me know when that starts. Okay. The whole idea is that you have this espoused theory of who you believe you are. Okay. But then there's a theory in action. And one of the ways that you're able to close the gap, you have to close the gap, or otherwise it's going to keep the cognitive dissonance going on in your head all the time, is that you have to have reflective practices. And some people are involved in yoga, some people take long walks, some people journal, some people just get silent for a little while and just get centered so that they can hopefully bridge the gap between their espoused theory and their theory in action.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for kind of expanding on that. All right. So you're one of two people who have seen my book manuscript, Nick and you. Right? Part of that goes back to my wife keeps asking to see it. I think I hurt her feelings as well that I haven't let her see it. Because it goes back to that. I can't have you govern my momentum right now because I know she's going to have a bunch of like grammatical questions and things like that. So you've seen the book. We've talked about the certification. The point I've been trying to make to folks is that certainty. Now I come at it from financial certainty angle, but the whole certainty, rigging the game concept and in the book, and what we're trying to do in the certification program is that certainty is not just about finances. It's about an overarching operating system for how you process issues and how you think about the intersection of your business and your life. So, I mean, I guess, how did I convince you to be involved in the, or what was it about? I didn't really convince you. What is it about what we're trying to do that makes someone like you willing to basically lead the charge on the curriculum and also, by the way, teach part of the actual program? What is it about certainty and the operating system that resonates with you? To put you on the spot, because I haven't asked.
Well, first of all, I appreciate being a part of a project like this, but I hope the people that are viewing this or listening to it can understand how valuable this actually is. I come from a background of it's extremely pragmatic from my dad and how you had to work and you had to accomplish something. And then going into academics and university and then going to places or being in places like Intel and Microsoft and valuing output, valuing actually being able to make something actionable. And what is missing now in all of these theories, okay, and I don't care where they come from, and they could be the diffusion of innovations or the management and all these different management books, Lead from the Future or Fierce Conversations and all those kinds of things. They give you a lot of background on things, but really don't help you drill down to the essence and then make a decision or have something that is important. I'll give you an example. I'm a coach, okay? And so when people ask me, well, what are you going to get out of, what am I going to get out of your coaching? And I say, so what would change your life most dramatically for the better? And they say, well, that would be, I don't know, I'll change and I'll give you an example because it's a friend of mine. I'm a finance person, but I really want to be a doctor. Okay.
That's one of my good friends who did this.
Yeah. And I looked at him.
Who you coach?
And I said, have you ever taken physics? No. Have you ever taken chemistry? No. Biology? No, I was a finance major. I said, okay, you haven't taken any of this, but you are a finance major and you're an attorney. Yeah. Okay, let's go to work. Okay.
Yeah.
Because he learned those other two things, and that was just a system, okay, whether it's medical school or not. Long story short, he's a doctor now, and while he was in medical school, he won the award for being the best researcher, and that was against people who were pre-med. Okay.
Yep. With 2 young kids, yeah.
With 2 young kids, okay, a mid-career professional changing and going into what was perceived as the toughest thing to approach. Okay? Now, that's me as a coach saying you should be able to guarantee people results. I get frustrated with this because if I have a plumber that comes into my house, okay, and fixes the pipe, and I turn on the faucet and water shooting everywhere, should that person get paid? No, okay. But if I'm going to spew a bunch of theories, okay, at you and not show you how to drill down to make them practicable, then I shouldn't get paid either. And I've told everybody that's taken my class for 20 years, if you take the principles, okay, this is for the class, I'm not talking about everything else, but if you take the principles that we apply in this class and you keep a journal of all the things you do for 1 year, and if things aren't dramatically better for you, whatever you decided to do, okay, I will give you twice the money that you paid for this class. And in 20 years, I've never given out a dime because either they have done the work that they set out to do, or they got tired and quit and decided not to. Okay. But the principles work if you work them, and there should be some type of certainty involved. And so once I read that, I said, boy, this boy's learned a lot from me. No,
You get a couple shout outs in the book.
Yeah, you did. I was really pleased with that. I'm always bragging on these people. You're part of that same brain trust of people that went to medical school or developed I had a guy who was a quarterback at Dartmouth. He wasn't even a starter, but he wasn't even a business major, but he had this idea of a sports drink bottle that could either change the level of dilution of the sports drink. And
Yep.
Came to me,
Circle.
we worked together, got him involved in some things. I think that company now over 4 years is worth something like $90 million.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, it's people will say, well, gosh, why can't anybody do it? Well, they haven't put in the requisite amount of research. Those 2,000 books were important. I mean, everything from rocket science, okay, to how to fly a horse. So all of these things, if you amalgamate them and apply them, we will be able to get you where you want to go.
Awesome. Maybe we can open it up and see if anybody has questions they want to ask you. Raise your hand and we can add you as a panelist. You can ask Randy a question or you can drop it in the chat. Leadership, management, marketing, rocket science.
Rocket science, yeah.
I'll give a little bit just because I got an email, and if she wants to raise her hand and chat, that's fine. But I got an email just now that said, "What's Randy saying is a language that I've been missing for what is needed to help people." It's kind of operating system that she's been looking for. She also said, "I'll keep listening," and currently is operating this way, but would have taken a decade before she would be able to figure it out herself. And I think, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, this has been my experience in listening to Randy and Jeff Spencer and Dan. Some of the best stuff is, like stuff that we're doing partially or fully intuitively, and then we hear the language for it and we go, oh, that's what I'm doing. And we could start to kind of solidify the operating system and be more consistent in our own decisions. So I just got that email, thought I'd share it. But I think that's one of the most powerful things when you talk to somebody like Randy who has all the experience and they say something, you go, oh, and it validates something that maybe you were doubting because somebody else told you should operate differently, right? So
I have to pick up on that, Nick, because I've got another one of my experiences. Oh, boy, they had somebody else to say.
Someone just said there. Chantel says I'm doing laps walking. LOL, I can't process this stuff sitting down. Play your game. I mean, play your game. Part of what's in my book, where you get credited the most, is the whole idea of play your game. That was our first ever meeting, and I have borrowed or stole, depending on your perspective, the sort of way to figure out people's style. And you're always telling me to play my game.
That probably went way back. Shameless plug, I started a company called How to Make a Nation. We work in mainly developing countries, doing textiles. This is my math, okay, from Guatemala. But I went to some of those Mayan ruins where they played these ball games back probably 10,000, probably 1,000 years ago. And I bet you there was somebody on the sideline, a coach in that ball game saying, "Hey man, just play your game." Okay. And in those days, the consequences were really great because they chopped your head off for losing. But the whole point of this is you're going to be the best you. And what we try to find is where have you excelled, and then build on that. Too many people get performance reviews or critiqued, and they say, work on all these weaknesses. Okay? And by the time you put all the energy in the weaknesses, the things you did well start to fade. So we want you to do it. The other piece that Nick brought up, and I work with athletes and work with college athletes a lot. And I always say, a scholarship is going to school on somebody else's tuition. If you can go to school on my tuition and not make the same mistakes that I made over and over again, then that's what this is all about. Just seeing people not having to go through this, okay, and being unfettered so that they can become that, next Elon Musk or whatever you want to do. Then the other thing too, there's somebody, just interrupt me if somebody wants to ask a question. But the thing that I've encountered lately about certainty and guarantees, I have my son is probably involved. I say most likely the top entertainer in the city now.
Yeah, I think that. Is there really a question about that at this point?
I'm not. I don't know anybody else who's more popular or involved, but he's starting to garner a lot of attention from Hollywood, these types and what they want to do. Okay. And so one person wants to manage him and coach him and all this. And they said, here's the fee. And so they sent me this contract that said, you're guaranteeing X amount. Okay. So I sent back the sentence and said, okay, I know what I'm going to guarantee. What are you going to guarantee? And you should hear them backpedal like, oh, you don't understand how the business works. We can't guarantee anything. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, so it's your idea, my money, and no guarantee. Is that do I have that right? Okay. Well, you have to understand how the industry works. No, the industry's going to work the way that I want it to work. Okay, I grew up in LA and I heard people like you all the time. Okay, you either put yourself on the line or we're not going to work. Okay. And it's amazing how people will backtrack on those kinds of things. But it's important that you understand that your agenda is what's important here. Not all these advisors and all these people. You own your career or your company or anything. Too many people are taking advice from people who have been in the business. I've been in the business 20 years. No, you had 1 year, 20 times. And that's the unfortunate part. Okay.
We'll see if anyone jumps in with a question. We may have another guest jump on in a minute. We're just getting confirmation. We'll see if they jump on, and then it'd be fun to have you guys talk.
2 minutes. And
2 minutes. All right. 2 minutes.
You're gonna get Dan's cornerman mentor and my cornerman at the same time.
Oh, okay, good.
All right. So talk to people about the heart popper.
I don't know if I have 2 minutes, but I remember.
You can have 4 minutes.
I remember talking about cholesterol with Coco, okay? And because she was eating some bunch of stuff that had cholesterol. And she said, well, what it will do? I said, well, if you keep eating like that, your heart will pop, okay? And she said, so what do I do to keep it from popping? I said, well, you got to exercise, you have to eat right stuff. And I turned and I looked at her and she was doing a bunch of exercises, arm exercises, and she was going all hyperactive trying to get her cholesterol down. And so anytime I see people kind of go half cocked with a bunch of energy, we call that a heart popper. So we try to keep the heart poppers to a minimum. But it was just so funny how she did that.
Yeah, it's just that danger of like that. I always convert that to like the hustle mentality, or the in the book I talk about the commandment number 1, closer, greater than more. It's like more is sort of the heart popper. It's like you're off to the races.
Yeah.
Just assuming that, okay, all the exercise in the world now, without connecting it to what you're actually trying to get.
In my mind's eye, I could still see her with her little tights on. She's about 5 years old, but to this day, we still call her the heart popper.
I know you caution me a couple times a year about like, okay, don't go do a heart. This sounds like a heart pop.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think any moment now we'll have Dr. Jeff jump on. People have questions or takeaways. What's your takeaway from Randy?
I will. I'll take a moment. And again, questions. Go ahead and drop them. We're here for you. So anything you guys need or any questions you have, I'm watching the chat, watching the Q&A. We got about 30 to 45 more minutes. So we're going to have our second guest, Dr. Jeff Spencer, come on. Hopefully maybe him and Randy get a dialogue. That'd be great. They're both contributing to the Certainty certification. And we'll go about 30, maybe 45 minutes if there's some questions. And then what we're going to do is take a break, either an hour or 45 minutes, depending on how long this goes. And you can eat, go to the restroom, hydrate, for sure. Hydrate. Don't just sit here and, dry yourself up. Yeah. Good job, Dan. See,
I think there's like a bell ringing.
Implementation. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back. So just know you're going to have some time to handle whatever you're going to handle. We're going to come back, and we're going to share the framework that Dan has created to scale consulting services. His firm, it's called the Architect and the Engineer. Might have a different name in a week because you know how we iterate through these things. But we're going to have a little bit of break. So just sit through with Dr. Jeff Spencer. Pay attention, ask questions, get whatever you need. And we also encourage you during this downtime to start working through that workbook that Dan shared. You have the step-by-step workbook. If you need a link, just ask me. I'll put it in the chat again before we break. And I encourage you to get through the workbook so that if you get hung up, you know where you get hung up, and we can kind of help work you through it. And again, we have obviously our diamond call next week as well. And we'll wait for the Dr. Jeff Spencer. I will, when we talk about certainty, when we talk about the top half of the top 1%, I'm just going to intro him while he figures out the tech. Dr. Jeff Spencer, if you haven't been introduced, is the corner man. So when there's a gold medal on the line, or U2, when Bono has they're doing a tour and they're thinking, man, we might not make it through this one. This is the longest tour we've ever done. And last time we almost tried to kill each other. They called Dr. Jeff Spencer, say, hey, come with us. All 8 Tour de France victories, unfortunately, were stripped, but he was the mindset and performance coach for not just Lance Armstrong. That's the one that obviously we all know, but he was for the whole entire U.S. team. Works with, Randy mentioned Chris Voss. So that's our connection to Chris Voss, is through Jeff Spencer, Jim Quick, Dave Asprey. When somebody says, hey, I have this goal, and I need to achieve it with a level of certainty, it's Jeff Spencer that they turn to. So we'll chat a little bit about 30 minutes of certainty, and Jeff is also contributing to the certification. So he will be he'll put together some curriculum and be one of the instructors and support in the certification, which we will obviously give you all the details for before we wrap up today.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break and give Dr. Jeff a chance to.
Yep, take a couple minutes. I'm gonna help troubleshoot some tech. So much easier when you just drive to an address and be there.
Randy, are you still there?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Can you hang out for a little bit and maybe jump? We'll take a 5-minute break, but I'm sure you and Jeff can jam a little bit.
Good.
All right.
I appreciate that.
All right. We'll see you guys back here. Let's just say 1:10.
Okay. Appreciate you.
Oh, the Jeff Spencer was here. There he is.
Should I remain behind the curtain?
Oh, you're good. You're good. We're gonna we got about a three-minute break. Just
Okay, good.
every time we have a guest on, we try to give some leeway for tech issues.
Okay, cool. Is Randy on? Can he hear me?
Randy, he might have used the
I got it.
Yeah,
So-
I'm here. I was just moving around for a
there we
minute.
go.
Hey, Randy, it's Jeff. I'm a friend of Nick's,
Yeah.
and just wanted to say hello. He's been so complimentary about his conversations with you, and he shared with me many of the insights that he's gathered from you. So you're already as about high as you can go on the Nick scale. Not many people get there, so way to go.
Well, I appreciate that. That's a lot coming from him. That's a high bar.
That's right, man. I got to tell you, man, few get behind the veil, so you made the cut.
Well, same with you. Every time I talk to him, they're telling him about Jeff Spencer. So I'm just, it's interesting how people find each other as
Totally.
they're ascending. I always talk about how Beethoven went over Mozart's house.
Oh.
And
Well, it's sort of the
he
same
goes,
thing. It's the perfect analogy. Come
yeah.
on, perfect analogy.
So Mozart told Beethoven to play something, okay, and he played something.
Check him out.
Yeah, and it was classical. And he said that's good. It's studied, okay, but play something. And Beethoven went into his Beethoven act, and
Shut him down.
Mozart said, went in the other room and came back and said, that kid's going to give the world something to talk about.
Okay, man. Well,
And
I'm
so
glad you got the challenge. That's awesome.
you're the Beethoven of achievement.
Well, it's called channeling. You just never know what's going to come out. So you're taking your chances. You know? Hey, I'm hoping, Randy, maybe we can get a word or do a Zoom or something to catch up with each other. It seems like I feel like you're a friend, but we've never spoken. Maybe we can arrange something sometime to say hello.
I would love to.
Cool.
The things that you've worked on, the things that you continue to do.
Yeah.
Everybody else our age is talking about stopping.
Dude, they're talking about bowel habits and prostate exams. I don't want to talk about that stuff. You know?
Yeah.
Forget it.
And so if I can find somebody who's still up to bat, okay, and still,
All right, man. You're at the right place.
I love that.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
We'll circle back. I would love that. You're legendary. I just want you to know that.
Well, I appreciate that, but I've been standing on the shoulders of some giants.
Yeah, if you hang around long enough, you're going to get some love, you know?
That's what I'm hoping for. I can't get any from my family.
Well, of course not. You're only dad.
Yeah.
Oh, that's only dad, you know? It's dad. Come on, man.
Say, here's the million things that I'm doing that you don't get any credit for.
That's exactly right. I think every time I turn around, I've lost another pair of earbuds to my kids that I've lost them. You know, Dad, you weren't here, so I took them. Is that okay? Yeah. Well, where are they? I don't know. I lost them. So, I hope that doesn't inconvenience you, Dad.
Yeah.
No, of course not. No problem.
Well, it's been interesting living with a rock star because he even has things like spoons that are missing. On the run, he takes
All right.
food plates and stuff like that.
So he's a Renaissance man, is what you're telling me. He's a Renaissance man, right?
Yeah. Renaissance men.
He could take from everywhere, right?
Yeah, that's what we say. We take in information and things from disparate sources, we amalgamate them, and then we correct them at some point when we synthesize and direct. Yeah, that's his specialty.
Exactly right.
But it turns out okay. You know, this 12th and Pine album that he's got out goes
Fantastic.
all the way from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Homer to Sun Tzu. All the songs on there have something to do with that.
Well, that's a miracle if anybody knows even one of those guys.
That's true. Not
You
even
know?
more.
Yeah, the connection between, that would be a trivia question. What's the connection between Sun Tzu and Mr. X? You know, what's the common denominator?
That's
funny.
exactly what's happened. So it's been interesting. I was telling Jeff that I've been dealing with a lot of Hollywood people who are trying to get my son to join their camp.
I gotcha. Yeah.
And it's like they've been on an intellectual fast. They have
That's
one
right.
dimension and they just stick with it. And then they tell me I don't know how it works. So,
That's exactly right. Dad, you'll come around someday. You know,
Yeah.
we'll be patient with you, Dad. You know, we'll tolerate you for the time being.
yeah.
I get it. You know, hey, I love the way you've strung those 3-syllable, 4-syllable words together too, by the way. Amalgamated. Man, that's impressive.
Well, that's the academic part.
Okay, well,
I had 20
that's
years of
impressive, man. I just want to acknowledge that, okay?
No, well, you got to understand, I was in the half of the class that made the top half possible.
So you were in the top 80% of the class?
No, I was in the half that made everybody else possible. They liked when they saw me coming, they liked that they were grading on a curve.
That's right. He's finally here.
Yeah, it's like he's not going to ruin the curve.
That's right. We've been waiting a long time for you, Randy. Jeez, I thought for a second you were going to show up. Screw us up, man. That's
Well,
funny.
It's it's pretty crazy. And I like to think about these kids that outstripped the mediocrity that raised them.
Yeah, man. I
But,
get you, man.
but it took them a while.
I get you, man. I had the same thing. We adopted our daughter from Colombia at the age of 10, like 11 years ago. So someday I'll tell you the saga on that one. But hardest thing ever, man.
Mhm.
Put me on my knees. Put me on my knees, man. Put me on my knees.
That's coming from an Olympic medalist saying it's the hardest thing you've ever done.
Totally, man. It's like the Olympics was easy compared to that, man. So I got my PTSD. I'm nursing along, you know,
Oh, yeah.
from that experience.
Chantel says I could listen to this all day.
Oh, she eavesdropping.
This is the summit. We should just introduce these two at 11 a.m. and just sat back for 5 hours.
We just channel.
Next
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it's I'm always interested in meeting Olympians because of how much they have to put in for 10
Couple
seconds, 20 seconds, one day,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that people that can delay gratification like that, so that's why some of them kind of blow a gasket every now and then.
Well, it's easy to understand. I think, for me, the thing was, it's like, you got 10 years of your life that you're accountable for. And what happens if you don't make it?
That's
You're
right.
still accountable for 10 years, and you got to
right.
answer to that in some way, shape, or form. So it's its own story, actually. There's 3 parts to it. It's like what it takes to get there. There's the experience of being in it. There's the aftermath of the autopsy of what you could have done better after it that just doesn't go away overnight. So
Absolutely.
that'll be another, we can get an archive of list of things that we could talk about for the next couple decades, I'm guessing. So
Well, I do appreciate it. One of the highlights, I worked with an Olympic swim coach who was very prominent here in Seattle for many years.
oh, you did.
And one of the highlights of that was to have him come to my classes.
Oh, that's great.
Talk
Yeah, man,
about what the
for sure.
sacrifice is,
Yeah.
and the upside. And there's actually a society, I guess, the Olympic coaches belong to called ECOS.
Hmm.
ECOS was apparently the first Olympic coach back in ancient.
Oh, no
Athens.
kidding. So like the Athens games, when was that? I can't remember. That was a long time ago, but
Yeah, and in whatever BC it was, but the thing that I see that principles of achievement still haven't changed.
No.
In that long. And so you think about, you said all those multisyllabic things that I put in.
That was impressive, man.
Yeah. Well, really that stuff comes from, 5,000 years ago. So,
Right.
Yeah, I've got someone rummaging around in my kitchen here. Call the police.
But I got to know, it's like, is the scarf you're wearing like a rank of, sophistication, or like IQ above 150? Where is that, or how's that work out? How's it
Only
work?
people who are aficionados of something.
All right.
But,
I didn't know if I was.
You mentioned Colombia. I started a company called How to Make a Nation.
Oh, no kidding.
I started I've taken a lot of study tours to Guatemala and Latin American stuff. And so, Puerto Plata Español casi bien.
That's so funny.
But I said, every time I go to one of these countries, I leave and I really don't do anything for anybody that I can leave behind so that they can actually help economically
Yeah.
the situation. So I started this How to Make a Nation.
Beautiful.
So this group of people in a textile cooperative in Guatemala, a beautiful place called Lake Atitlan, and they make these and other kinds of, masks. And so we sell them around the world. And then we've got some, Paraguay, and then we're trying to bring up South Africa.
Nice.
This month.
Way to go.
So
All right. I'm gonna. I introduced you, Jeff, while you were
okay.
for you. So if, I don't know if you did that, but and we got to hear you guys. That was awesome. So Randy just spoke, and it was phenomenal. And we're talking about certainty, right? The stuff you and I always talk about, closing the gap between where you're at, where you want to be, and we're launching our certification, which is a big deal. I think a lot of marketers, I have emails of people like, I'm not really into certifications because academics are stupid and, stuff like that. And so maybe we talk a little bit about that, but ultimately we're talking about creating transformation, and not just with ourselves, but certifying people. So going through this transformation process of because you got to transform to get to where you want to go, but also helping their clients and then aiding, like, as coaches and consultants and service providers and cornermen and mentors. Randy mentioned a piece that totally changed topics on you here. But Randy said something: there's two tyrants of leadership, scrutiny and expectation. So as you're going through this transformation, right, you run into all this friction from your friends and your family, and the people that are like, oh, you're too cool to hang out with us on Saturday night now, because you're striving for something, right? And what we have you slotted in the certainty certification in a spot that we call mental agility, which is really just kind of adapting that champion's mind, as you call it, throughout this transformational process. So if you wouldn't mind, and I actually don't like to prepare you, because when you channel, when you just hear
that's always the best.
it's like, we're here, we want to go here. And a lot of people on this call are also helping other people identify where they're at and where they want to go. And I think the two tyrants of leadership, the facing, how do we adapt to, hey, look, I'm going to do this thing. And now we get scrutiny from our friends and our family and the naysayers, right? And then there's expectations about how we should be spending our time. We have expectations for ourselves. We have other people have expectations for us all of a sudden, like a gold medal. How do you deal with the pressure of, well, now you're expected to win a gold medal, right? So, 10, 15 minutes, however long you want to go, just kind of talking a little bit about this, this idea of, okay, look, we have to transform ourselves, and what we all do is help other people do it as well. How do we maintain what Dan calls mental agility, very similar to what you call the champion's mind, throughout this process when stress, overwhelm, expectations, depression, loneliness, when all these things start kicking in? And as you're listening to Jeff, what I say with Randy, what I implore you to do is take it in as he's speaking to you, but also understand that these are the things that you can relay back to your clients and people that you work with. So it's really two levels of benefit here for you personally, and then also how you can pass it forward to the people you work with. So Jeff, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you, Nick, and I really appreciate the fact that you kind of catch me off guard, because then I don't have time to talk myself out of how I would normally talk. So thank you. I think for sure is that anytime we enter the arena, there's a whole host of things that we should be mindful of and be prepared for in advance. And that's that there will be the critics that are in the stands ready to shoot the arrows at our back whenever possible. We just have to kind of know that that's part of it. And let me give you an analogy here, is that I had a very well-known author, Stephen Kotler, who co-wrote the book Abundance with Peter Diamandis. He had a severe case of writer's block, and he had to deliver a manuscript on time for publication. And he got locked up and he couldn't write. And so he went to everybody else first, and then he came to me. Well, yeah, like, thanks a lot. Appreciate that a lot, Stephen. But actually, he did me a favor, because he tried everybody else first, and then he came to me last, and he could appreciate my simplicity and how I could cut through the jive to be able to get to the mother lode to help him through this. And so what I said to him is that, well, you're trying to write to please the critics and to please your editors. Therefore, you forfeited your rhythm and your flow, because when you're playing someone else's game, your timing is always off, because you're trying to think your way through a process that doesn't come naturally to you. We have to respect that. And if we look at the goodwill and the intention of people to want to help us, our family and our friends and the pseudo experts, and there's never any short of detractors out there, we should just be mindful that that's always there. So to prepare ourselves for a period of isolation, where we are not in proximity to that because they can't help themselves. So we have to take a proaction against that by creating our own sanctuary. And part of that is also to inform other people what we're doing, because nobody's a mind reader, yet we all expect each other to be that. And if we tell them, look, I'm doing this thing X, and I'll be off the grid between the hours of such and such on these dates, I need your help and your support in this to let me have those hours to myself, and I will resurface and we can resume any conversation you want at that time, but please respect this boundary. And so you have proactively taken a stance and informed people about a block of time, and you've already told them what you need from them. Nobody's a mind reader. That has to be stated in advance. You also have to be really prepared that when you step onto the field, that you have a deliberate starting procedure. Unless you have a deliberate starting procedure, don't step onto the field. Now, preparation and being on the field, those are very important parts, but the transitional element there is a deliberate starting strategy, meaning that, like, let's say I go on stage at 1 p.m. Okay, great. I need to show up at 1:45. I need to check in. I need to get mic'd. I need to make sure that I got the right shoes on, etc. I've cleared my voice. I've composed myself. I know the venue. I know where I need to go on stage. I've accounted for everything. I'm at baseline now. Now, when I get the go signal, I step out and I execute. So that was just a primitive example of a process that has to be there, that takes all of your preparation and applies it correctly to begin the process. Now, notice how that was its own little separate place and time. And the reason why we do that is that we have to check in with ourselves and be deliberate. And there will be, again, well-meaning people that want to try to help us. Like you're standing there ready to go on, and somebody comes up, well, would you like a Coca-Cola? Like right at the perfect wrong instant of time. So we absolutely 100% need to make sure that we have rehearsed that, but it's also been vetted in advance and it's been practiced. So there's no ambiguity about it. We just execute what we practice, so that you can walk out on stage, whatever that stage is. It may be a conversation, it may be an athletic field, it may be a presentation in front of a group. I mean, who knows, but it's kind of the same gold medal equivalent there, that we have to have the preparation. We have to insulate ourselves so we know that we've done the preparation well, where we have a body of evidence that we can't perform it, because if we've done it in practice, then we can execute it in real time, providing that we have a set, deliberate starting strategy. It's got to be there. It's got to be rehearsed. So your human mindset's going to say, well, hold on a second here. you're not being really authentic. You're trying to control your creativity by rehearsing something. And I'll say that, that is our human mind trying to tell us something that is not true. Because if we're not prepared and we don't know it, then our anxiety goes through the roof. You can't just make something up on the spot. Or if you do, you're going to try to retrieve your words. That takes time, where you're losing your spontaneity and your believability to the audience and yourself. And then you start to lock up and things start to even disintegrate even further. So let's be really clear that rehearsals are a responsible process by which we provide ourselves with the evidence that we actually can do it. And then when we show up and we have a hedge of protection around us from intruders that want to, even though they're well-meaning, can interrupt our flow, we've already made a contingency for that. We already know how to step onto the stage and what we're going to say first to get the ball rolling. So then all of our preparation rolls off our tongue in the execution side of it. And that's the way that this really has to be handled in kind of every aspect of our state of readiness to step onto the stage and to perform at the level that we're capable of performing at. Let me talk a little bit about fear here for a second, because human nature, which is not our friend, our friend is our champion's mind. The human nature is the voice that tries to talk us out of everything good. It's just the perfect wrong time. We all know what that's like. We also probably have experienced our champion self that's able to override that consciously by saying, okay, I know this voice is coming. I can't silence it. If I fight with it, it's going to control the conversation. I'm not going to be able to deliver what counts when it needs to be delivered. So therefore, I have to recognize that it's up to me to execute what has to go right with explicit timing. Everybody see how that works? And so when we hold the process sacred in that vessel and we hermetically seal ourselves off, that's allowing our true creativity to emerge and execute the process for us. So that's not the inauthentic us trying to take control. It's the conscious champion us protecting our spontaneity to show up on time when it can do its magic. And that's where there's that intimate link between us and client, us and audience, so on and so forth. So we have to be really mindful about this fear thing. A couple more points about this that I'd like to make is that in the human mindset, the trickster, that thing in us that tells us exactly the wrong thing to do at the perfect wrong time. Have you ever said anything to somebody that you regret, but before you said it, you thought it would be the greatest thing ever because it seemed so right, but it went so wrong? Well, that's what I'm talking about. That's our human nature, survival instinct that's faster than we can think, acting on our behalf, which is really our imposter. That's really not the real us, even though we thought that it would be us. It's really not. It's just the antithesis of that. So we have another myth that we tell ourselves. If I'm not calm, then I can't perform well. Another absolute complete lie. That's a fabrication of human nature's interpretation of what it should be when it's absolutely not what it needs to be. When we had the classic signs of fear, sweaty palms, perspiration, racing heartbeat, dilated pupils, etc., cold hands, that's a sign of biologic readiness, meaning that all of our systems that are required to go full blast from moment zero are now accessible. That's actually our friend. We can't get on the stage and stumble along and take a 5-minute warm up to get up to pace. We need to go from 0 to 100 instantaneously to capture the audience and to inform them that we're competent in what we're doing and we're confident in our ability to deliver it. When we feel these signs and symptoms of fear, that biologic readiness is important, and all we need to do is execute that which has to go right and not believe the mythology that you need to be cool as a cucumber, so to speak, there. So another part that I want to mention in this, we're kind of talking about stepping onto the field and delivering when it counts. And that's no different, gold medalists in the Olympics versus us when we're talking to a new client. This is an honest to God truth. I got a text from Nick. He said, "Are you ready to come on?" I said, "I'll be home in 2 minutes." When was that? That was like 2 minutes to 1. I just came back from a interview that I had for a prospective client of mine. Her net worth was 400 million. And so I was talking with her about this particular process that I do. And I was mindful that I needed to speak with her as I would speak with anybody, not through the eyes of her perceived uh, difference between me and her. And I feel like I executed it perfectly, because even though there was some apprehension on my side in situations like this, being an Olympian, I knew that fear was my friend and that there was a state of readiness there to be able to execute that which had to go right. So it kind of doesn't matter where you are or what you're facing. Let's be really clear about the fact that the champion's golden rule is you do the homework and the test is easy. So when you're prepared and you have evidence of it and you understand the fear factor that's going to be there and we anticipate it, we also anticipate the well-meaning intentions of our friends and everybody else coming out of the woodwork that could screw up our timing, and we insulate ourselves from that, then we can be very clear that the chances of us executing everything correctly dramatically tips into our favor. And those are some of the things that I think that are absolutely essential to be mindful of.
Awesome. Thank you for that. We'll do a little bit of maybe a little bit dialogue, a little bit Q&A, but I just want to share that Jeff and I we get about 2.5 hours a week together, and it's life-changing. And you'll notice there's a lot of similar language between him and Randy, Dan, and it's not because they've spent a lot of time together. You just saw them meet each other. It's just, these are like the natural laws that people start to figure out over time. And so what Jeff mentioned, and we did not prepare this ahead of time. Actually, what I told him to prepare was different than what I asked him. And I had him schedule a different time. So change the time and the topic last minute. But like you mentioned, there's this biological readiness, right? And the $400 million client, and realizing the few things that have to go right. And I'm just using this as a shameless plug for the certification. That is what the CERTI certification is. It is an intensive way to give you the framework that's not restrictive, but it allows you to be creative and know that these are the things that have to go right. And those are the things, like Randy said, that we're going to practice and practice and practice and practice throughout the certification process. So neither one of them was prepared to speak about what we asked them, which is awesome. And so, Jeff, thank you. Randy, if you're still here, thank you. What we'll do, I think, is any questions, Q&A, message it. You drop in the messages, drop in the Q&A. Dan, if you have anything you want to add. And Jeff, you just delivered as you always do. And congratulations on continuing to get these outrageously high net worth people.
I don't have any question. I'm just happy to sit back and listen to Jeff and Randy just go back and forth. So that's my selfish ask. Just let Randy and Jeff talk more. But it's always good to see you, and always appreciate to see you.
I feel like I'm in a master class right now in what I do. I thought I was good, but now I've met the master. And it's amazing. I wrote in the chat that Jeff inverts the common wisdom and creates champions. You know, when people say, oh, you're not supposed to be nervous, or you're not supposed to have the adrenaline flowing, I was just remarking while I was listening to him, okay, at well into my 60s, didn't feel a joint, didn't feel a muscle, didn't feel anything aching while I'm talking to him, because the adrenaline was already pumping. I feel like I could go out there and knock somebody through a brick wall, okay? And people should feel like that every day, okay? So Jeff, how do we get people to feel this, or at least be open to it every day?
I think the most important thing is that we be mindful that if we get up too quick and we get into the day too quick, fearing that we'll get left behind if we don't keep up, then we start the day automatically off balance. And we will start to lose time immediately. We'll get frustrated. We'll try to get back what we think we lost. It'll compound the difficulties in our belief in self and our confidence in our ability to deliver will deteriorate. And we can only take that so long before we start to believe that that's us. It's not us. It's just the fact that we didn't take the time in the morning to put the armor on before we engage the battle. So to me, there needs to be a couple of really important things done in the morning that are progressive, where we systematically, we're in the locker room and we're putting the pads on.
Mhm.
You know, the first thing when we get up, don't try to wake yourself up too fast, too quick,
Yeah.
because there's kind of a transition time where we have a first awareness of the day, and then we're in kind of like a dreamlight state. And in that dreamlight state, if you kind of check in with yourself, you'll find that you may have some solutions to complex problems waiting there for you that your brain figured out during the brain restorative, psychological restorative period of sleep that happens like from 12 p.m., 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. Don't bypass that step. Don't get into action too quick. The next thing that I would kind of suggest is that you have some type of gentle physical activity to warm the body up, because the best way to engage the brain to a higher level of function is through physical activity. And it doesn't have to be hard. Hard activity in the morning almost stresses the body too quickly. It's not natural. And so we want to bring the brain online progressively where it doesn't feel like it's being assaulted. Otherwise, it will shut down. It will start to race. And then we are subject to amateurish mental errors. We don't want to start the day like that.
Mhm.
And then two other things that I'd like to say here is that while you're going through the physical activity, this is gentle. It could be Tai Chi, Qigong, presence of being, prayer, etc. That you really think about what mindset you're going to be coming from that day. Are you going to express once again the human nature, impulsive side of yourself that always makes its choices on what it stands to lose because it's driven by fear? That's our natural state of being. Do you want to be and have another day where the natural yourself controls the narrative, where you show up impulsively making decisions out of fear of what you stand to lose or fear of getting left behind, where you're reacting to everything, trying to cover all the bases and end up being effectual in nothing? Is that what we really want? Or do we want to come from the champion's mind, which is different? It's a three-dimensional living, breathing organism that can collate, interpret, edit information. And that's where we have the chance to enact conscious decisions to create a day at the end of which we can say it was the product of what we desire to have happen to honor our clients, our life, our potential, and the value of what that day had to offer. We got to make a conscious decision every day. How are you going to show up? Are you going to show up and be impulsive once again? Are you going to follow the natural path that everybody else does? Or is this a day we're going to become supernatural by going against the grain, by applying the things that history has told us that have to get done, that put us at much higher ground predictably? Two more things I want to add. Am I okay on this, Nick? Can I purge a couple more things here?
Yep. I'm going to ask one thing though.
Keep
Yes,
going.
please.
If this is valuable to you listening, because I'm about to do this, maybe think of it. Do me a favor, screenshot on your phone or your computer or something, and put it on a social media platform somewhere. Don't care. Tag somebody on here and just give a shout out to Randy and Jeff, because I want more people to tune in to this kind of wisdom, not the, excuse my language, the goofy shit elsewhere on the internet. So please, Jeff, go ahead and continue. But if this is valuable to you, just screenshot, tag somebody somewhere, and help people get into this world a little bit.
Just two more quick tips here. A couple of minutes before you start engaging people, places, and things for the day, two questions you need to answer for yourself. How am I going to show up? And what I mean by that is, who is the person that you are intentionally going to be for others that day? That could be the most important decision that you make, because how you show up does impact and does influence people. I'm going to tell you a story about my daughter very quickly here. We adopted her from Colombia at the age of 11. She was kidnapped by the authorities from her family at the age of 5 and placed into foster homes, where she was repeatedly beaten up, and there was physical abuse that you can only imagine, until the age of 10. And she didn't ask for that, but that was thrown on top of her. She did not ask for that. That may have perhaps scar her for her life. We don't know yet. But the point is that had those people shown up differently, she wouldn't have to deal with this burden that she didn't ask for. I believe none of us have the right to put our stuff on top of anybody else. That's up to us to figure out on our own time. It's up to us to show up with dignity and respect for others and for our legacy and our potential and the gifts that we're given by making a conscious decision of how we're going to show up for people. And in my opinion, the deal is we show up unconditionally and we give everything the best that we've got so that at the end of the day, we believe that we earned our sleep because we showed up with honor. And maybe those things that we had a natural inclination to do that we may think is us, where it's not us, it's really the not us. The real us is the one that can control ourselves and show up and be that beacon of hope and sanity and courage in a world gone crazy. The second thing, I have a picture. I have 3 pictures in front of me on my desk that I look at. One of my wife and I when we got married 37 years ago. I have another one of my daughter when she graduated from high school. Nobody in her family ever graduated from elementary school, seriously. And I have a picture, it's a silhouette, black and white picture of a crowd, which represents everybody that I'm going to meet that day. And I remind myself, why am I doing this? I'm doing this for them. You know, when I'm fortified by those things, I can show up and I can get the job done. And I feel like I've earned my day and I've earned my sleep and I earn a good meal at the end of the day because I show up and I found a way beyond myself. That helps me. It helps everybody else. That's all I have to say.
Well, that's enough.
Oh,
you talk a lot about being deliberate, and a lot of people say that's robotic, or that's you need to have the spontaneity, you need to wake up and be a free spirit. Do you have the joy in your life that the free spirits try to go for?
I have so much exuberance and belief in a bigger and a better because I know what would ruin my creativity is my spontaneity that is not controlled. That's energy that can't be applied towards something deliberately that can advance things towards completion. So there is no evidence that we either honored our talents or we took the privilege and the opportunity seriously, because you cannot deliver like that. It's not possible. It's like big is a purposeful event that's the action of deliberate things consistently applied. It's not stifling creativity. What it's doing is setting up the guardrails where our creativity can express itself at its best.
It's interesting that you talk about preparation not for the event, but prior to the event. In the book, 6 Lessons for 6 Sons, speaking of Olympian, Rayford Johnson is, do you know who that is?
I do.
Yeah, okay. Rayford Johnson was the 1960 Rome Olympics decathlon champion. He was a student at UCLA as well. He was student body president of UCLA. He played for the great John Wooden. He's just an incredible person, but he introduces the chapter on just the pride. There's 6 lessons and one of them is pride. And he introduces a chapter there and he talks about the preparation is before the race. Okay. The race isn't what you're there for. You're there to be centered, to get your head together, your mind together, so that the race is a foregone conclusion. And most people haven't been even exposed to that. And so it's one of those things that Jeff said, I just want to know your feeling on competition, okay, and what that does. Some people are just anti-competition, period. Okay, and preparing yourself to be in competition. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Randy. Just so eloquently said there. I just hung on every word that you shared with us just then. But I think, the worst moment of our life is where we become too domesticated, because that's when we start to erode. That's where we start to weaken. That's where we start to lose our edge. That's where our enthusiasm starts to dim. And there has to be a target. We're born to create. And if we're not creating, then we're not we're not honoring the biology that was hardwired into us. We're designed to be manifestors
Mhm.
of significance, and to also say that there's only one of us in all of creation, which means that all of us are uniquely qualified to do something of extraordinary merit that is an equal contribution that other people would make, that we can't attach a significance to in terms of the size and the magnitude that we believe it to be, because even one saying a grain of sand, maybe the grain of sand that flips the teeter-totter over, and if we're the one giving it, then we were the catalyst for everything, and it may have been the event that we thought was insignificant that created that. So let's make sure that we don't kind of decide the merits of our impact by the comparison against others, because there's only one of us, which means that our unique capacity, nobody on this planet has ever had.
Mhm.
We just kind of need to connect with that, and also embrace those things that come easy to us as gifts. Don't take them as easy, therefore they're insignificant, because everybody should be able to do it.
Mhm.
Don't also mistake the fact that we have a gift that means that we didn't have to try as hard, therefore we don't earn the accolades that we get from it, so we don't do it. That's another really common thing that I see. And so we need competition to stay in the game and to stay sharp. We need competition to bring out the best in other people. Competition may be between us and our human nature that wants to talk us out of everything good, which is really our imposter. It's not really necessarily our friend. Do we want to be natural or supernatural? We want to be supernatural to honor the privilege, not to showcase self as if we're the one to be showcased. It's really to tell other people what's possible, and that the ability to get from where you are to where you want to go demands competition, because you don't know what you don't know about yourself. And if you don't know what you don't know about yourself, then you can't get any better. And if we're doing better to honor the talent and showcase to others, then we kind of deserve to compete against each other in mutual love and admiration to help each other craft the best out of what we have to give, because no one wins alone. It's not possible. We need a team.
Absolutely. I'll turn this back over to Dan and Nick, but I'll keep going if you guys want me.
Well, I have a couple of questions for you. Could I do that? Is that,
Yeah, go ahead.
so Randy, I know that you have been face to face with some of the most prolific household names of our era. I mean, like the freaking real deal.
Yeah.
What is it that you see that you have contributed most to them to help unlock part of them that they couldn't see and they didn't have access to, that you saw, that you were able to tease out and make the difference?
Wow, that's an amazing question. It is an amazing question. And I will put it this way. You know, everybody has something they have to overcome, and everybody has challenges. And what the people that have performed extraordinarily understand, that your issues either go in your trunk and you carry them around and they weigh you down. And every time you get ready to do something, you go back and look at it and say, oh, well, I guess I won't be able to do that. Or I remember I tried that once and it didn't work. Or it goes into your tank and you use it as fuel. And every extraordinary person that I've seen, that I've been, and they've gone through some amazing, catastrophes, and yet they still found its way somehow into their tank. They may have lost a child, and then you see this all the time, and they say, "I'm going to be an advocate for whatever," Or you may see them that they've had some catastrophic business failure, and they get up off the canvas and say, yeah, this happened to me. I'm acknowledging it, but I'm using it for fuel to go do the next thing. And that trunk versus tank is something that most people don't understand. They stop and put it in the trunk, and then they constantly remind you. I have people all the time that are constantly reminding me of something that I didn't do right 25, 30, 40 years ago. Like, okay, and guess what? I used that as fuel and went and did either something else or did that better. And the fact that you fail publicly or something in that, and that goes into your trunk and you carry that around and you get to Thanksgiving dinner and you're all, meek and shrunk down. You don't have an opinion anymore because you've got failure in your background, and every person does. Okay. And the ones that are extraordinary put that back in the tank. And you see them all the time when you work with athletes. They say, I'm going to rededicate myself. Okay. I'm cutting out all these things. I'm changing how I show up. Okay. And I've never seen a person that didn't get a second chance to do something that put things in the tank.
Yeah.
Just, yeah. I was fortunate enough to meet Nelson Mandela on a couple of occasions. And you look at his background, okay, and even when he was on trial for his life for treason, he was in law school and taking exams and getting A's, okay, and even while he was in prison, okay. You think about, okay, I am the South African Defense Forces and police and their equivalent CIA, looking for him all over the place. He grows a beard, gets a chauffeur's hat, drives a white guy around that actually worked in his organization, so he looked like he was a chauffeur. He still did an hour worth of running in place, okay, in the morning, even while he was on the run. Okay? So that he could have just hid out, stayed under the radar, not still take care of himself or commit to the things that made his constitution great. And he still woke up every day and committed to who he was, even in the face of death. And see, people don't understand. They think that something's going to happen and all of a sudden they're going to change. No, you're going to be the same way you are. Unfortunately, and I don't want people, I'll accept condolences on this, but I don't want a lot of people upset or upset for me. I lost my mom to COVID earlier in the year. I lost my brother, one of the 6 lessons for 6 sons, brothers, who was right before me, the third one. Larry lost him last in December. Okay. And I find that people are the same in around death as they are in life. Okay. If you don't have the capacity to handle things, somebody gets sick or something around you, okay, and you're falling apart more than the people that are affected by it. Okay? And when the time for people to be level-headed, it's not that you don't grieve, okay, that's part of the thing, but it was time for you to be level-headed to make some decisions on things, where things have to go and how to put them in place, okay? You have to have prepared yourself. You have to have done the repetitions in your mind and in your heart, okay? And you have to be able to draw on that. Those are the dependable strengths that you use. And so as I miss my relatives in this terrible time that we're living in, I still applaud that that's cool, okay? They know that they knew in passing that they could depend on me and that they could ask, they said, well, what do you want? What are your wishes? And they say, call Randy, he'll know, okay? And to take it from there, and it's not that they've even talked to me about it. It's just call Randy, he'll know. That comes from years and years of being able to practice. And in case, the other thing, I told everyone on the call that there was somebody in my kitchen that we should call the police. Actually, somebody trying to get my attention because my daughter in her book, all of a sudden through Amazon and all this stuff, was put on the 21 debut books for 2021. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so it was more like, hey, you got to see this. I said, I'm busy, but that is the culmination of working 8-9 years, doing the repetitions, okay, having the failures, having people reject books and things like that, and then putting that in the tank, okay, to the point now where they said, all right, we want to do a whole advertising campaign and want you on Wall Street Journal and all these different places. And we say, okay, That sounds like an overnight success that took 8 years. And putting things in your tank versus your trunk. That's what we've always taught, okay? And you can see it manifest itself all around you. That's just one example of many people. So I hope the people that come to the whole certainty set of seminars that we put on can understand that it's not just for somebody else. That same daughter had was diagnosed slightly dyslexic when she was in first, second grade. We got her involved in a lot of different kind of reading therapies as well as music, and she learned to read music and then became a top flight reader and was by the end of that, she was in all AP classes throughout high school and stuff like that. So you don't know where you can start anywhere, but if it goes into the tank, okay, and you don't get flipped out, and I get mad at these teachers are terrible, they are against my kid for whatever reason, and they're not doing their job and all that stuff, okay. No, I went to work, okay? And now we have the result of that. So bring it in the tank, and things will happen.
Could I ask a question, Randy, please? So when you get to that place when you're in the daily grind, you kind of don't see any way out. You kind of need some level of validation that confirms to you that you are making progress, even though you may not feel like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you decide to stay in the tank. Is there and are there a couple of strategies that can be employed that provide the evidence that we are making subtle progress, or who do we turn to, or what do we do to make that shift where we stay in the game until we hit critical mass, where then the grain of sand flips the teeter-totter over? Any suggestions on that at all?
Well, you see behind me, there's a zillion books.
Yeah.
Okay? So many books, we had to remodel to put the books in. But right there on the top shelf, there are a bunch of big books, and that's The Story of Civilization from Will Durant. The first thing that I want to do is associate with people that have gone through hardships, and they're all in those books, okay? And so I will read a lot of biographies about people that had a lot worse off than me, and how they overcame it, and what were the signs. Because usually the closer you get to a breakthrough, a lot of times that's when things are worse. That's when you run out of money. That's when you health problems or something like that. And you got to know that you are close. The other thing that is so important, Jeff, is that I journal. And one of the things, because I'm a student of Spanish language, it helps me to journal in Spanish. Okay, so it helps me conceptualize more and do the things that I want to do for all the companies in Latin American stuff that I started. Journaling is so important. I talk about reflective practices. You can do yoga, you can walk, you can do all these things, but there's something magical that happens when it goes from your brain to your heart in through your hand, wherever it is, and you start putting it down on paper and you start to see that. And there's something cathartic that comes over you, even in the midst of just terrible things, okay? And you start feeling better, okay? You start feeling more optimistic. And you go, well, somebody can say, Randy, what are you talking about? You don't look the oppression that I'm under. Just do this for 28 straight days. There's a book called Psycho-Cybernetics that tell you how to establish a habit. Okay? And then finally, and Jeff, you mentioned this, there's also a book, I'm always giving out bibliographies for people. There's a book called My Morning Routine. They interviewed a bunch of people about what they do in the morning, and every one of them had, was successful in whatever given endeavor, and each one of them had an approach. You don't have to do what Jeff Spencer does. You don't have to do what Randy Massingale or Nick Peterson. Definitely you don't have to do what Dan Nicholson does with all those kids he's got running around. But you have to do something, okay? And that's where you get the impetus to go forward.
So really, it's like you're trusting a creative process to reveal to you the insights that you can't give yourself by showing up and taking action, because the action organizes the revelation. Would you say that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And see, once, and we talked about in the other one, frequency, intensity, then purpose. Okay. Most people just jump out there, they have a purpose, and then they just keep on that. And then they burn out and stop, or they're not doing it. You see them 2 months later, and they're not doing it anymore. Okay? And that's because they haven't established the habits. Okay. The frequency, the intensity being your stamp that you put on things. Okay. Not how hard you do it, but your aesthetic. Okay. The way you do it. And then all of a sudden you do that long enough, then you start getting purpose. Then you start dedicating your life. I really want to do this. Okay. And the sooner you can do that, the better you'll feel, because the resiliency that you experience having done that is monumental. Okay. And it's not like you shut off emotions and things like that. That's not part of it. In fact, you are way more in touch, okay, because you've honed them. So I don't know if that answered your question, Jeff. But
I just want to tag along like a little dog and listen to you talk all day long. That's all I want to do is tag along.
well,
You
I'm
see
trying
my,
to stop talking.
Give me a
So
leash. I just want to tag along, you know?
you have to think about how many pages of notes I've taken while you've been talking.
Well, back at you, man. My brain is smoking from what you just said there. It's
I
fantastic.
dropped in the chat. We got to get you guys a podcast called "Get Off My Lawn," inverting common wisdom.
I think that's Randy.
I could do that.
think that's
Well, we're both from LA. How long did you live in LA?
I pretty much all my life. We had the rural experiment when I lived in Oregon. That was the kind of off the grid experience, and then Scottsdale, Arizona for a while, but LA all the way.
Yeah, we have that in common, and
Okay, there you
Oregon as well. I went to Oregon when I was 17.
Okay, well there you go. Okay, it's destiny, man. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. We can actually go back to the old neighborhood.
That's right. Let's
They
do
have have you guys seen that, like what is it, driving in cars with comedians or something?
Yeah, I've seen that. It was like, who was it?
We just record you guys driving around the
Oh,
streets of LA.
it would be crazy, Jeff, because this is interesting. When I was in high school, Westchester High School.
I know exactly where that is, man.
Oh,
You know what? I actually, one of my first girlfriend's dad was the principal there, by the way.
Oh yeah, was it Dr. Herman?
It was. That's exactly right. That's what it was, dude. I'm telling you. That's exactly right. I got goosebumps head to toe.
Oh man.
Seriously.
Yeah, that'll scare you to death.
I got it, 1963, my first girlfriend.
Oh God.
Chris Herman, man. That's it.
Yeah, he was there. It's interesting, some of the other people, because I've talked about this before. You grow up with show business people and stuff like that, and there used to be a TV show called Family Affair, and there was a little girl named Buffy who had a doll named Mrs. Beasley, and she went to school there too. But also a lot of people in the Manson family. So
What?
yeah, like 2-3 people from the Manson family. And Phil Hartman, the guy that was on Saturday Night Live for many years. He was there too. So it was an interesting place. We went to school with Ray Charles's kids. Were our Tina Turner's kids were part of that, and so it was definitely a different experience. But I went from South Central LA, Crenshaw High School, to Westchester, and my two brothers were student body presidents at Crenshaw High, and the one that passed away recently was one of the student body presidents. So we're starting, shameless plug number 3, starting a teacher support fund at Crenshaw High called the Massengale Teacher Support Fund. And so that these teachers at public schools don't have to come out of pocket for supplies and things like that. So that's going in the month of February. Any donations will be matched up to $5,000. I will match in the first $5,000 that comes in. So we really, it's obviously an inner city school, but it also has some illustrious alumni like Ice-T and Daryl Strawberry, Marcus Johnson, a lot of those people came from that school too.